Yeah, I have a drink. I'll make it.
Oh, of course. The second I go live, we lose Brandon.
Brandon, our man on the ground at the site of the Rayshard Brooks Community Center, or formerly Rayshard Brooks Community Center, and before that, ruined husk of a Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks was murdered. Things have been real hectic down there.
Yeah.
Reports I'm hearing from people on the ground, and I'm sure Brandon will come back and tell us more about this when he gets hooked back in, are really fucking grim. Multiple stories of people driving cars into and at protesters, multiple stories of people showing up with guns and drive-by shootings. And, now, unfortunately, the police have completely destroyed all of the things people had built at the community center. It has been, at this point, I think we can say, torn apart, broken up. I don't know. I would not say the movement is over. It certainly is not, but it does appear that we have lost this battle. Brandon, what insights do you have?
Yeah, what's it like on the ground there right now?
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, everybody that's on the ground is still interested in keeping this going. They're working on some actions right now as we speak. And they really want to emphasize like the positive nature of all of everything that happened for the last month. This wasn't something that happened on one day, and at the end of the day, there was a shooting. There's been an occupation down here at this place since Rayshard Brooks was killed. Like, I'm literally right here at the fucking place. I'm not trying to like take nobody while I'm down here though. But there's like a group of people down here, and yeah, action continues. People are very pissed off because the feeling is that Mayor Bottoms kind of took the first opportunity that was presented to her to squash like what was going on out here, and to lay blame at the feet of these protesters to help her friends and her funders. Those of y'all who have been like in Atlanta for a long time know that she came up in the legal world, first as a lawyer, then as a judge. So obviously working with police and prosecutors is not like new to Keisha Bottoms. So yeah, people down here is real pissed off, man. I don't know what to tell y'all.
I mean,
go ahead.
That narrative that you're describing of like sort of presenting it as like, oh, this was around for 5 minutes and it immediately went wrong. Like, that's been like one of the typical sort of disruptive media tactics that they've been using against things like this, whether it's, the Rayshard Brooks Community Center, or it's the Capitol Hill organized protest zone, or whatever it is. Like, they've been doing this over and over again, where they act like, oh, look, they couldn't keep their shit together for 5 minutes. The Rayshard Brooks Community Center kept its shit together for weeks and weeks and weeks in a city that traditionally has problems. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like Atlanta is known for its gloriously low crime rate. So like,
hey, you're not from here. Don't start dropping that on us. Breaking Bad over there. Chill out.
I'm not saying it's insanely bad. I'm just saying that it's not like, it's not exceptionally good, and
is anywhere in America really like any major?
But this is like one of the issues is like the perception with these autonomous zones is that like the minute that they have a crime problem that is like major, it's like, well, look, they couldn't handle it. But the realistic reality is that shooting could have happened without those people there, and the cops never solve it. Period. Right?
Well, the two things that we got to stress here is, number one, they had de-escalated like countless situations in the month beforehand, and it's true that like, well, I don't want to go into every detail that I heard here. So what I will also say is this place was never designed to be an autonomous zone. They were not following the lead of like the shit that was happening in Washington. This was not meant to be that. This was meant to be a community center. And when I came through here on Saturday, they were doing petitions and political actions and raising money in order to kind of have a place here that's in a food desert, that's in an impoverished area. If you are from Southwest Atlanta, you know what the deal is down here. They were like attempting to put something here that was for the community. And there was just an incredible amount of stress and emphasis on making this place community friendly. And it's kind of sad that the media worked so hard to demonize what was going on here without like any kind of communication with the people that were here organizing.
And just like I said, there's an absurdity to the idea that like these community situations are supposed to perfectly handle crime immediately as soon as they like take the reins somewhat. Whereas we know again that the cops are not solving these crimes.
The United States has 244 fucking years of not figuring out how to fix crime. So the fact that they think that a group of organizers, many of whom, have no experience running an autonomous zone or running a community center or, dealing with cops or de-escalating those kinds of situations would suddenly figure it out in a matter of weeks, that's ridiculous. And unfortunately, although there are many really great organizers down at the scene, Brandon being an example of one of them, who do have a lot of experience with this work, most people don't have those resources, and most people who are showing up to these things don't have that kind of experience. And it is very difficult as an organizer on the ground to convey all of the learning that you need to have to really be able to effectively manage this in that kind of environment. And, I think, like you're saying, there's an absurdity to this idea that these people should, suddenly be able to just do it intuitively when, again, look at the United States, 244 years, and we still have more bad cops than good ones.
Yeah, and they are instructing people down here not to really talk to the press because the press coverage has been so lopsided that like it's not really worth the time to go to Channel 2 and like try to give a story, because like if you listen to Atlanta local news or really any local news anywhere, you know that the deal is your statement is going to be like one sentence and the cops are going to get like 12 minutes to characterize what the situation is, and you might get half a bar. So it's really important that people who are here in Atlanta elevate like what the actual message that was going on here was, because it's not going to come from like regular mainstream media.
Absolutely.
And stop killing us shouldn't be a controversial fucking message. It just shouldn't. Like, the fact that you can't even get a group of people together at the site of a murder and protest that without white supremacists showing up with guns to try and threaten you or hurt you and get you to leave and just lay down and take it is obscene.
Yeah. Hey, quick question.
No excuse for the reaction that white people in our community have had to this, that white supremacists in our community have had to this. Every single person who in any capacity has participated, not just in, the violence against this group of people, but the just systematic smearing of this group of people, should be held personally accountable and should hold themselves personally accountable to what happened there and to what is continuing to go wrong when white supremacists show up with weapons. And the police obviously don't talk about this. We know the police are on the ground calling those same white supremacists friendlies and that they are on the same team and that they know they're on the same team, but the media is not covering that. Or at least, the media that isn't us isn't covering that. And it's ridiculous. And it's obscene, and the media should be fucking ashamed of themselves. White people generally, we need to be ashamed of ourselves real hard right now. Like, the entire Atlanta community at large needs to be doing better than this.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. It's very fucked up, and people down here are very pissed off at Mayor Keisha, who, comes down here and pretends to be on the side of people on TV. And when all this was going on, like, there wasn't any attempt to help. There wasn't any attempt to solidify it. There wasn't any attempt to even de-escalate it. She just kind of let it linger and get worse. And unfortunately, like, people here are just like incredibly pissed off at how the last month is gone, because this is not like a one-time event. This is a culmination of shit that's been going on for like a long time here. And even like, this isn't even just about police violence, because when I talk to people, it's about economics. It's about job opportunities. It's about who owns like the stores and the shit that's out here. If you like live in Southwest Atlanta, it's not a lot of black owned shit out here. It's a lot of black people that are working for a fucking minimum wage. But there's not like a lot of economic opportunity, which is one of the reasons why Keisha was talking about this is a food desert, and the Wendy's is one of the places that people go to eat. Like, that's like a positive thing, or that it employs minorities. Like, yeah, it's black faces working at like all these places down here, but how many are in charge? Let me ask y'all a quick question. How is my video and audio quality?
Oh, it's absolutely
Fine.
perfect.
Yeah, fine.
Actually, yeah.
Th-
Sounds great.
this live stream sponsored by Verizon. If you're on T-Mobile and it looks like a fucking slideshow, switch to Verizon, where the shit is professional. They have unlimited data and you can do shit like this and not like look like you are on that super low budget. That's all I have to say about that.
Verizon
And, you know,
70%.
transparent grab for money. Shout out to our patrons who help us afford things like access to Verizon. So
Yeah,
that,
real talk. That it's the
quality.
patrons that actually make this possible. But
yeah.
I don't know what y'all mean. I paid Verizon myself, but patrons
it's the
keep chipping in.
Brandon that makes this all possible.
That's right.
Honestly, that's truer than I think a lot of people who know about Brandon in the abstract could ever understand. Brandon,
you're very kind. I'm trying to be out here in these streets, all that kind of shit. So yeah.
So are there any like lessons learned, anything that everyone's going to be carrying forward as we continue, you know, protesting and pushing back against the oppression of the state? You know,
we should have we should have been up here sooner is what I think. I think part of it was they closed the shit down on purpose and they didn't want people from outside but like I feel like we could have contributed more to the shit as it went on because there was a lot of struggle to even put the shit up despite the fact that it got knocked down in a few hours. I wish we had been more on the ground, like working to build this shit up. But you know, you're making connections and shit, and maybe you can be on the ground floor of the next shit that goes down. I kind of hope. Well, there's a lot more success in fundraising than you might think. So it's possible that this story will have a happy ending. We're just kind of keeping our ears to the ground and working on it and seeing what happens. I don't want to fucking run my mouth about this shit too much, though.
Yeah. Of course, we're not trying to give anybody too much information about what comes next.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think there is a tension that has been very palpable recently in the organizing circles I've been in between these sort of two opposing goals and the sort of dialectic between them. On the one hand, you know, in order to really win this, we need to build a mass movement. And that means the majority of people, if we can get it, need to at least be in favor of what we're doing. You know, there's something to be said if like 10% of the population actively rises up, they become ungovernable, right? And so like we don't necessarily need to have every single person on board. But in order to get to the point where 10% of people are willing to rise up, we really do need to be looking at like 51% or more of people being at the very least okay with the idea. You know, this is a narrative game and this is a media game as much as anything else.
I was gonna say
other side
not
of
even 10%. It's actually closer to 3%. But
really?
Again, you have to have support from the wider populace for that
Right.
3%. You need like a dedicated number of people to actually make the change, but they can only do that if other people support them. But go on.
Right. And I mean, the point still stands, of course.
Yeah.
The other side of that is trying to maintain, you know, security, cohesion, coherence between different people working towards the same goal, but with different strategies. And that's fucking hard. Like, that's just hard. Try to get, you know, 30 people in a room to agree on something, let alone trying to get all of these different millions of people and all of the different tendencies and factions within those groups to really work together on a goal. That's difficult to balance.
Well, and, that's why movements have problems like after they get rid of the first guy, because we all agreed on that and we all worked together to do that. But afterwards, what are we doing after? What are we doing the day after and after that? Right. And it's hard to, it's like, but do you make that a precondition of working together that we all know what we're doing the next day? Because that makes it harder to get over the first hurdle. So, right. Like we have history to learn from. I don't want to dig into that, but we got to look into the history of who got these things together and what kind of leadership did they have and what kind of message did they have and how did they handle afterwards?
Right. I think this also plays into like the sort of issue of like flexible versus inflexible movements, where a lot of people create a movement and it works well for them in their time. And so they think, okay, this is good. This is like positive. This is correct, whatever, however you want to put it. Right. but like basically like, you know, you see this all the time with like people who like, for instance, you know, they start some kind of like political commune in their neighborhood or whatever. And like, it's great for them, but then their kids try to carry it on and it all gets real fucked up and political and everything goes to shit right away. And it's not because those kids were bad or because the original ideas were wrong. It's because, you know, like I say, like there was this inflexibility to the ideas, like that, you know, these people had sort of like come to this conclusion that they had found the solution, so to speak, right? Like the solution, as opposed to finding just a solution that worked for them and like being ready to accept the idea that that solution might not work for their kids or their grandkids or even just the people coming 10 minutes after them. Like, and like that's just been like, that's like an ongoing problem with a lot of organizing. Like,
Right.
you know, like I said, people kind of like think, okay, yes, we found it. This is the solution. Instead of just being like, okay, this works right now. We'll use it till something better comes along, which is the attitude that people should have towards like everything.
Right. You and I were talking about this before we went on the air, actually, about sort of the need to develop a comprehensive plan for what we're doing right now. You know, we have so many ideas about what the end state is going to be and what we want to develop, you know, and I mean, people disagree on those, right? Like, do we want like a stateless, classless society? Do we want more social programs, but roughly the same infrastructure? You know, do we want to just change voting? Do we want to change healthcare? Like, is it specific aspects of how society functions, or do we want to have something completely different? But even in as much as we all have those different ideas of the end state, most of us don't have a really solid idea of how we're going to get to even the first parts of those, you know? And I think tying into what you were just saying now, Kennedy, we really need to reframe the way we are thinking about this movement away from end states and more towards how we are approaching these problems and how we can do that together, you know, and really looking at what we are doing right now to be building these connections. And frankly, like, there are a lot of ways to be doing that, but the real core concept is we need to be personally engaging with our communities again. We need.
Hey, y'all.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Well, listen, while we're waiting on her, I'm about to slide out. I'll talk to y'all at a later time because I want to organize and strategize and do all that kind of shit.
Be present there on the scene.
Yeah, I'll leave y'all to the rest of the show. I wanted to pop in from the scene and like let y'all know the truth of what was going on out here, and kind of share my perspective on that. So, all right, thank y'all for letting me come on for a few minutes, and I'll let y'all rock the rest of the show.
Well, and thank you for the work you're putting in down there.
Yes.
Yo, I'll see y'all later.
See you later. So where did I cut out?
You were just talking about, you know, like, oh shoot, now I just was listening to Brandon. I kind of forgot exactly. I had the train of thought.
I was talking about.
You were just talking about like the necessity of like having some steps, and like I think this is also like, I just kind of apply the logic that I would have in like a personal relationship to this sometimes, right? Where like if somebody's upset. Sometimes it's okay to just yell and fight for a little while. Like if you and your partner are upset with each other, you just need to like yell at each other a little bit. Hey, I'm hurt. Hey, I'm hurt. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's a productivity to like that part of it, but that can only go on so long before it's like, okay, so what's the solution? Or like with friendships, it's the same thing, right? Like, you know, if like two of your friends are fighting at a certain point, you can't just listen to them bitch about each other. You have to come to them and say, okay, what's your solution? Is your solution that we don't hang out with Greg anymore? Is your solution that, you know, we get you and Greg together and you guys mediate this out? Like what's the actual practical next step to this? And I think that there has been like a disconnect between some of these movements and that practical next step. And it's not the fault of the organizers, the people on the ground. I want to be really clear about who I'm laying the blame on in general. I would say that the biggest blame lies with the politicians, first of all, and then second of all, with like the organizers who showed up 2 weeks later. Some of those organizers are not trustworthy. You see these people leading marches and shit, and they're saying, oh, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to be good. We're going to be the good protesters. I'm not like the other protesters.
Right.
You know, like As soon as people start talking that kind of shit at the start of a rally about like good protesters and bad protesters and what kind of protesters we're going to be, kick them off the stage and find somebody else. Kick them off the stage and find somebody else. I'm not playing. Like,
I agree very emphatically. You know, there are so many people who are showing up in this chaos looking to make personal gains. Former chair of Metro Atlanta DSA, who just want to, you know, further their own image or, you know, get their Instagram noticed or get their Twitter noticed. And I mean, shit, like we are here doing media shit. Obviously, like we are in some capacity playing with that as well. And I understand that like self-promotion is necessary. But if you ever step up on that stage with the intention of bringing any kind of attention to yourself and have the fucking audacity to lead by saying the other protesters or the other protests are somehow invalid, you lose. That's it. Like, you are no longer relevant to the movement because you are not of the movement, and we stand in solidarity together, full stop.
And you know, it's not just about getting clout. Some of these people are literally out there to undermine us. They are literally out there to undermine us. I know I'm emphasizing a lot of what I have to say today, but like, I feel like people are not hearing this shit enough yet. Like, we are still dealing with a lot of people who are still kind of like holding on to these weird perceptions about what the protests are like, what's, you know, outside agitators, things like that. You know, all these concepts are still like getting into a lot of people's minds and infecting their brains with this bad thing. And so, yeah, like it's, you have to, like I say, literally remember that some of these people are out to be disruptive. Now, they may not be out to be disruptive in like a deep conspiracy, deep state, this guy is paid by the CIA kind of way. A lot of people are out to be disruptive for completely stupid, petty, selfish reasons. It doesn't even have to be a deep conspiracy. There are a lot of people who just want to undermine movements because their movement didn't work out. And so they want to undermine your movement because they're mad and they're jealous. There are people that want to undermine movements for all kinds of crazy ass reasons that have nothing to do with reality or anything important. But again, like, they will come in and they will start riding your organizers, start, you know, hey, you should let us take the charge on this protest. We're an experienced protest group. You know, we have, you know, we're the pros. Like, let us come manage your shit. Well, these fucking pros are fucking libs who are completely complicit in the system a lot of the time. And so as soon as they start managing your shit, then your shit is fucked.
Right. And this ties back to the tension I mentioned earlier between trying to have a mass movement and trying to have something cohesive and consistent and trying to have a message. You know, and I'll be honest, I don't think there is like a real solution to that beyond it's just something you have to constantly be managing and you have to be good at managing. And right, agreed. Do not let our protests get Kanye'd, and that can mean a lot of different things, and all of them are bad.
Yeah. Do let them get my beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy, though.
Yeah, I mean,
like, or making Kanye jokes. But yeah, like, look, we should probably move on to some other news topics, but I just really want to wrap this up on the note of like the yellow vest protests in France. We've just been watching this. We have a neighbor across the way. And to be clear, I'm in total solidarity with these protests. I'm not saying this because I think these people are bad. I'm not trying to blame the victims or say, oh, these protesters, they're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. But we've seen a clear example in the yellow vest protest that, like, it doesn't matter how dramatic or powerful your protests are if there's not a clear next step. Because the yellow vest protests, we haven't had anything like firefighters lighting themselves on fire with the brawl with the cops here. Nothing that's happened here yet is that wild, right?
That's cool as shit. I didn't know that happened.
Yes, you should go look. There's pictures of shit. It's wild as fuck.
Cool as shit.
Firefighters literally put on their fire protective jackets and shit, lit them on fire and started brawling with the cops. And the cops are like, this guy's on fire. It's amazing. But
when I say we need to build a coalition of people that includes, you know, carpenters and farmers and doctors and medical workers, let me just emphasize one more time. We need some firefighters.
Definitely. So, but again, if protests that dramatic didn't get it done there, it doesn't matter how dramatic our protests get. We need to get that out of our head, that there's like a level of drama that's going to solve this problem. At this point, we need a next step.
Right.
And we're starting to see progress towards that, to be clear. Like, I mean, like the CHOP, the Richard Brooks Community Center, all these things are actually like people trying to figure out that next step, but we got to get there. We can't just keep, what is this it? Maybe we got to get there. And that really means that everybody's got to fight against these negative media narratives that are coming out about these places. Everybody needs to educate themselves about the work that's actually being done in places like this, about the people that are actually behind it, what the intentions are, what the messages are, et cetera, so that you can share that because you're well informed and you can tell people, actually, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone believed in this and this. Actually, the Battle Hill Autonomous Zone believed in this and this. Actually, the Rayshard Brooks Community Center fucking did shit for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks before anything bad happened. And here's all the shit that they did before Keisha Bottoms stepped in and said, oh, look how bad they are. So that's the message I really hope people are taking today, is like, we gotta fight these narratives as hard as we can so that we can actually take that next step, because people are trying and we need to support that.
Yeah. Well, and let me say, specifically as relates to, as we wrap up this topic of the Rayshard Brooks Community Center, Peace Center, what people were doing there was growing food and teaching classes and dancing and feeding each other. That was the spirit of the community center. And in spite of that, they were attacked violently multiple times. And it is absolutely unconscionable and heinous, and further evidence that we need to abolish them, that the police were not helping and protecting these people like they were supposed to be, and instead were on strike because somebody got disciplined for blatantly murdering someone. Blatantly.
Right.
You know, that is unconscionable. And if you ever tell me the police are here to help us, I will say, why were they not there? If they were really here to help the community, why were they not there? And yes, community is a threat to capital, and they prefer we stay alienated. You know, the last thing I want to say is I do not want to act like I am sweeping the death of a child under the rug. You know, that is a heinous, horrific thing.
Horrible.
I have a child. I have a daughter. The thought of that happening to me is, I would physically die of grief. But also, we need to understand the context that led to this moment. And it is so much bigger than just protesters clashing in a car and shooting at each other. You know, it is because the systems themselves are irreparably and irretrievably broken. And until we address these causes, until we fix these systemic and structural problems that are creating this kind of tension in the first place, it's going to keep happening. It's going to happen at our protests. It's going to happen in our fucking schools. It's going to happen in our movie theaters. It's going to keep happening anyway. And if you are horrified by these deaths, as I am, then you need to get off your ass and do something about it. And you need to fix these problems. These are going to keep happening. These are consequences. They don't happen in a vacuum.
Also, when it comes to stuff like the tragedy of this child dying, why is it that every time a fleck of blood hits the hands of us protesters, people are willing to go reach back for that completely blood-soaked hand that is the police? Like, they do not have a little blood on their hands. They literally, it is just dripping. It is just gore all the way up to their fucking elbows at this point. Like, there is no limit to the amount of blood that is on the hands of the cops. But somehow, if like things go a little bit wrong in a protest, people immediately go back to let's trust the cops, even though the cops, it's like the things that we're worried about the cops doing is this shit. And like they're doing it at a much faster rate than the people can even do at this point. So it's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we need to move on and talk about other news, but let it be known.
Other news.
Yeah, but let it be known, not safe for wonks. And I personally stand in solidarity with all of the protesters and I am not deterred by violence.
Absolutely.
It's terrible, but I stand in solidarity, full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit of like other news.
Do we want to talk about, do we want to do a Ghislaine update? Ghislaine? How do you say it?
I think it's Ghislaine, but I don't really know. I don't really give a shit if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I put a lot of effort into pronouncing things right on this show most of the time. But when it comes to someone like that, like I'll pronounce your name wrong as shit. I don't give a fuck about you. But yeah. So I mean, I'm sure all y'all know by now, but Ghislaine was arrested. And then immediately afterwards tested positive for COVID, which is very convenient and interesting, I think.
I thought that was just a joke.
No, she
really did. Like I have to, let me fact check that one.
Fact check that, because I think it was real.
Let's see. No, she has not.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That one.
All right.
That being said, look for it happening any second now, because God knows. And I think there's something telling, a satire website made this and everybody just assumed it was true, because this is how low our expectations have fallen.
I mean, I think we just all expect something like that to happen is the thing. We're just all waiting for the other shoe to drop with like, y'all aren't actually going to like arrest her and then use this to like bust all of these fucking, like, when it comes down to it, most likely Elon Musk is on the list. Most likely fucking everybody you like is on the list. Most likely a former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, is on the list. Bill Clinton is on the list. Fucking Prince Andrew is on the list. Like, most likely all these people are on the list. It's crazy to think, the cops will point to like if they arrest you, Rachel, they'll point to you hanging out with somebody one time as like proof of your bad character, like one time Rachel hung out with like a known gangbanger or whatever, right? And they'll use that as proof of your bad character, right? But like somehow getting on fucking the Pedo Express fucking 27 times with Jeffrey Epstein isn't enough to draw a conclusion from. Yes, it is. Yes, it actually is. All these people is going to turn out.
Well, let's be clear. With convicted sex offender at that point, Epstein. Like, they already knew he had been convicted of having sex with children.
Correct. All these people are going to get fucking nailed to the wall if this shit actually comes out. So that's why I think we're all just like, all right, so how long before Ghislaine Maxwell fucking dies? Because, like, are they really going to expose all this shit? It doesn't seem likely. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know what the internal politics are. If there's some, like, good people on the inside trying to make sure that this actually sees the light of day, maybe there are. But it just seems like so far they're not winning. If those people exist, they're certainly not getting their way. So on the other hand, like, the people who want to cover all this shit up, make Jeffrey Epstein and the entire history of what he was into disappear, seem to be getting their way a lot. So we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably they're just going to kill everybody and do it out in the open, and no one is going to even be surprised. But because the people are dead, they can't convict.
Did you see the fucking Ellen Pao tweet?
Yes.
That is...
It's kind of amazing. And I mean, I think at this point, honestly, it kind of seems to me that, like, in order to become a power player, you were just required to watch, I feel like they just made everybody do something that was absolutely unconscionable. Same shit you saw, over in Parliament in the UK. And that was just part of, like, what had to happen before they released the money to you is, haha, you're fucking complicit now.
So I knew a guy that I used to think was completely nuts, to be honest. But he was like an ex-WASP. Like, he came from WASP background, like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, rich white Anglo-Saxon. You know, if for those of you who don't know what WASP means. Anyway, but he came from like the rich white background, like the aristocratic American background. And he used to tell me crazy things sometimes about like things he thought about the government. He wouldn't talk about it very often. He wasn't like one of those people that's all the time just like, oh, here's my new theory or something like that. He actually wouldn't talk about this stuff very often, but he would sometimes tell me some crazy things that he thought about the government. And he absolutely said that his sincere belief was that when you became president, they took you in a room and they made you do a heinous crime in front of a camera. Like, and that they were like, okay, that now you're in our pocket. This is how it works. And like when you see things like this Ellen Pao tweet, it's like, what the fuck? Maybe this shit's true. I don't even know anymore. Like this Ellen Pao tweet is so fucking disturbing. She's literally like, yeah, we all knew that she was there peddling fucking underage girls to these guys at the party. And it was disgusting. Well, if you knew and it was disgusting, why the fuck did you not do anything about it? That's insane. What reason could you have had for being like, I'm not gonna do anything about it? Like, and at that point, it's like, well, maybe they did have something on you. And again, maybe they have to manufacture this shit. I don't know. Maybe they take you in a fucking dark room. You got a bag over your head. They take the bag off. There's a fucking, person, and they're like, here, murder this guy. Or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, here, now you're in the club. And like, if you ever step out of line, I don't even fucking know anymore. This sounds conspiratorial as shit, but I'm just saying, like, this Ellen Pao tweet is the most insane thing I've seen in days. It's so fucking insane that I cannot, like, it's breaking my entire concept of reality. I'm fucking losing my mind in real time, and y'all are just watching apparently, but here we go. Like,
well, I mean, like, I think that it's, maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's just the stark reality that these people have the means to fucking kill you if you say something. And because everyone who makes it into that culture is fundamentally, like, either incapable of empathy or has their capacity for empathy beaten out of them, they only watch their own backs. The only solidarity they have with each other is in as much as they have it against the people that they've been oppressing. And I think that realistically, they're just not a group of people who are really capable of coming together for justice, and so it's just
lack of empathy. That's like, I think that's really key. Cause like at the end of the day, even this conspiracy shit that I'm talking about, this is really my attempt to rationalize it. Right? This is me trying to figure out how this would make sense to me. These people are literally so despicable. They don't even need a gun held to their head. They actually don't. That's the real reality, is that there is no conspiracy, that these people are just fucking hungry for money and power. And Ellen Pao is certainly, absolutely in that category. We all know this. Come on. And so these people are absolutely so hungry for money and power that when they're around power, they just accept the terms of what is, whatever that is. And so when you're at these parties where the power is and it's moving and shaking, a party where there's Jeffrey Epstein and Elon Musk and all of these people together, like, obviously, like, power is being brokered. Decisions are being made that are going to, like, change people's lives for decades at parties like this sometimes. Like everything, like things are being decided on like these massive international fucking I'm playing Game of Thrones scales in these places. And so you just accept the terms of whatever's there. And in fact, Game of Thrones is the perfect example of this, right? Like, how often in Game of Thrones does a character like accept these sort of horrible situations because they want the power, And it's like, that's the way these people are. They want the power. And so nothing else really, really deeply matters. Ellen Pao could be being completely honest that she was disgusted by seeing what Ghislaine Maxwell was up to there, but she still wouldn't do anything about it because that would be disrupting her own power, and that can't happen.
I think that is the most likely thing, honestly, is that ultimately it is about class solidarity. It's not about any kind of meaningful attachment to each other. In fact, they're all kind of trying to get one over on each other. But at the end of the day, if you disrupt the system, you disrupt your own power, and they're not going to do that. And you say like Game of Thrones, but the truth is, I think it is a lot dumber than that. Frankly, I think that a lot of what is going on up there is really fucking stupid and arbitrary and banal. And I don't think even most of them are pedophiles. I think most of them are just really boring, powerful people who've never been challenged and never had a challenging thought. And these are not people who care about anything outside of their own, primary and immediate comfort. And I think that's enough. I hate to say that, because if it was like a big cabal of people that we could like overthrow easily, instead of, an entire class of millions of people who collectively, have this incredible amount of power and wealth and connections, with each other over, hundreds of years, like doing the same shit people do when they're born into those conditions, because we're all kind of the same. And I mean, I'm thinking for myself, like, have I ever like been in a room with somebody who I essentially disagreed with and found distasteful, but didn't fight because I couldn't win the fight? And like, yeah, of course. Like, I understand that motivation, and that's why when I talk about, like, it's never really these individual people, it's the systems. Like, this is why, it is an absolute fluke who gets born into which class. It is just completely arbitrary that, things fell out the way they did in terms of power in the United States. But what is not arbitrary is that these consequences are natural and unavoidable outputs of these systems. And until we start making mindful, intentional choices that are deliberately designed to just take apart those systems, we're going to keep seeing these outcomes. Because human beings are essentially the same. And we respond to the pressures that we find ourselves under. And if that means that we are taught to have no empathy from birth and that everyone is out to get you, we don't ever learn anything else. And we are a product of our environment. And that is not to excuse the horrific things these people are doing. It is not okay. They are responsible for their actions. But we cannot reasonably expect these things to change until we change the systems that are making them happen. Period.
On the subject of being a product of your upbringing, let's switch to a funnier topic. We've been serious for 42 minutes. Is
that a record?
No one who's not a New Mexican is going to understand this. Luckily, there aren't that many people watching today. But nobody who's not a New Mexican is going to understand this at all. But this is funny as shit to me. Okay, so Susana Martinez is our former governor. And she had a party at a hotel. And she was very drunk, extremely drunk. And the cops were called because they were being really loud. And there is this recording of her talking about the party while obviously intoxicated, like trying to like talk down the police, from like fucking with her. And she's like, it's just a pizza party. We're just having a pizza party. No one's drunk. We're eating pizza. And it's the funniest thing just about that. Like, one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. And it's definitely like a nonstop internal New Mexico meme for ever since that has come out, to just like play clips of that or just be like, hey, I'm just having a pizza party, and people just act drunk as shit. So that's a little aside, completely random, but Flow Girl is a New Mexican, so they bring this stuff up whenever they're here, and I love it, honestly, because sometimes I literally like thinking about things like this.
I mean, it's a good story. I don't think Georgia's ever going to be that cool, frankly, but we do have our share of just ridiculous horse shit that happens, so I get it.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about Claudia Conway.
Okay.
The daughter of George and Kellyanne Conway.
I missed this one. What happened?
Claudia Conway has in recent months become a relatively influential leftist TikToker. That's right. You heard me correctly. And I think this is really funny because we were just talking about people being products of their environment, right? And Claudia has given a couple of like short interviews. I think Inquirer maybe did one. And she said, like, I love my parents. They've been really wonderful parents, but I don't have to agree with them, basically, and like, it's kind of interesting to see someone like that and wonder, how did you end up here? Because like, she's like on TikTok doing BLM stuff. you know, all these things, like she's like all about it, and like she fights with her own parents on Twitter. Like that's been like the big thing that kind of caused this to blow up, is that like she's been like fighting with her own parents on Twitter somewhat regularly because they're like trying to kind of like get her to stop doing this and she won't, and like all this stuff's going on. And I like I said, the thing that I find really interesting that I want to talk about is like I really want to imagine, how do you get raised by the Conways and then end up at 15 on TikTok posting leftist shit nonstop?
My guess is whoever they hired to raise that kid for them did a really good job.
I mean, this is the problem sometimes, right? With these rich people, they hire these people to raise their kids. They never even really interact with the situation or see what that's really like. And they find out later that their kid was getting raised by like an ex-Black Panther or something, you know? Like,
to be clear, if we're going to do rank and file, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's just corrupt their children with leftist ideology. I'm into it. Rank and file all the way.
You're a leftist and you like doing childcare and you want to make a difference in the world, figure out how to become a nanny for the super rich. I'm telling you.
Bonus, they'll usually give you a place to live as part of it, and it's usually really nice accommodations, and you get paid.
You get paid more than I've ever been paid in my life for anything, probably. And I've done jobs that were highly professional at times. So
I mean, I can actually say meaningfully, like, you know, we talk about my petit bourgeois background sometimes. Like, I had like nannies that meaningfully impacted who I grew into. And one of them in particular, I can think of, who I just think of as like an older sister at this point. You know, so much of who I became is so clearly a reflection of her. And that includes the leftist parts. And, you know, she never like intentionally like corrupted my like tiny 6-year-old brain with leftist ideology, but like she didn't shave her legs. She talked about like people being certain like dynamics among people. You know, she was studying psychology, which I ended up doing, you know, and I think in a meaningful way, like I came out left of my parents because of interactions like that, because of people, you know, outside of my immediate house. I say this, but now my mom is like actually like down to do a leftist revolution. So like it did come back around. I did ultimately end up like bringing my mom back on board. Now I'm working on my dad because his hospital got bought out by like a mega corporation and he hates it. And I'm like, do you see now? Do you see now? Like,
right.
Yeah. But I mean, it is like, you know, it's this very strange sort of culture where these people have children as like obligations, you know, because it's the thing you're supposed to do, and not having kids is weird, and they'll do anything to avoid being weird. Like,
well, but also you can't continue your legacy without them.
Right? Yeah.
And a lot of these people are very invested in those kinds of ideas of like legacy, you know, like our family has blank, blank, blank for generations. You know,
the noblesse oblige.
Right, which is like a value that you just don't have if there's nothing to inherit. Let me tell you all something. like I don't care. What am I gonna pass on? I mean, maybe I'll have a successful media empire before I die, but like I will have literally made it off of the back of not having a child. You know what I mean? Like, not that having a child would completely preclude me from having the time for it, but like there's only so many factors that can give, right? I'm not rich. If I also had a child and health conditions, and I do have health conditions, then I would have no time for something like this.
Yeah, so, I mean, I have health conditions, a child, and daddy money, and I can barely make it work. Like,
yeah. And so that's the thing though, is like, that's okay. So that's kind of like one of the things that like contributes to something like the Claudia Conway situation though, right? Is that if you are rich, you live a lifestyle that's actually too active to raise a child in most cases, right? Yeah. Like you are busy. You fly to Seattle for a meeting every week. You know, like you take a trip to Paris twice a year to like meet a clothing designer there and set up a deal for, you know, the next 2 seasons of clothing wear or whatever. Like they have these obligations that sort of like consume so much of their life that like you don't have time to raise a child. And like we see this all the time where like, you know, of course with poor kids, it's like they just end up not getting as much parenting as they need most of the time when they're in these situations, but it happens all the time. But with rich people, it's like they just pay for that gap. And so they think that makes it all good. It's all okay. But like, they don't even know what kinds of kids that they have a lot of times, or like really anything about them. And like, you see this over and over and over again with these rich families. Where you can see
relationships are very superficial.
Yeah. It's like, yes, I'm technically this guy's son, and that matters from this, you know, this familial heritage, money, you know, maintenance kind of perspective. But like they don't seem to care about anything but that system, you know, like nothing else actually seems important. It's just that system. That's it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's really baked in, like the judgment and the violence that rich people place on other people, they place it on each other too, you know, and it really is that kind of hostile environment. And it is a function of this larger system of acquisition. You know, this is what happens when you make your society's goals generating profit, period. This is what happens. And so long as we continue to make profit and having more than you started with, the like ideal state for everyone as an intrinsic value our society espouses, we're going to keep seeing this. We have to let go of this idea that we all should have more all of the time, that having more is inherently good. And I don't mean to say that that means people need to just be satisfied with not having enough. What I'm saying is we need to let enough be the goal, that every single person has enough. And more than that should be considered like excessive and, you know, decadent, right? And that's how people end up in, you know, these sort of really rigid, violent reactions to it, is because that decadence eventually poisons it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I know I sound like a fucking monkey right now. The second I start talking about like, you know, capitalist decadence, I sound like a fucking Maoist. But like, truly, like, there is a truth at the center of that, you know, and it is that this pursuit of decadence is toxic inherently, and we need to let it go.
Like, I gotta say, we should really do an episode about Mao.
You know, I think one of the things I want to be doing, and you know, people who happen to be watching this as we're wrapping up anyway, can look forward to this later this week. I want to start talking about history more. And one of the things I want to talk about this week in particular is the history of Black communism in the South. But I think after that, if we wanted to like wrap in some stuff with like talking about Mao or talking about Lenin or talking about Marx, or like really doing like historical insights and overviews and how they relate to the modern era, like I think that's something we could do.
I would like to talk about Mao in particular, because I think that people have sort of like given a pass on the left to Lenin, like he wasn't perfect, but he was okay, you know, like that kind of like attitude, which first of all, arguably maybe he doesn't deserve. Second of all, like arguably though, Mao maybe also deserves that same level of credit, which is something that like he doesn't usually get. But, and I say this as somebody who's like, I'm not a Maoist. I'm not. Don't get crazy ideas if you're.
I mean, I have some pretty hostile attitudes towards, but
I'm not a Maoist per se, but I think that like a lot of times Mao is sort of left out of the discussion of like leftist philosophy. Like it's okay to talk about these philosophers, all these guys over here who coincidentally are all white, but we can't talk about the Asian socialist philosopher that, you know, was monumentally influential on the world. I mean, we talk about like the influence that these philosophers have had. Mao has had more influence than like any of them practically, and yet he's often recognized the least, or sort of talked about the least. Like, and I think it's an interesting topic, because even if you, again, like I'm not a Maoist, I don't agree with a lot of Mao's principles, but I think I'm curious as to, okay, why was he successful still, right? Like, I still want to know why he was successful. And I think people should be examining it from that perspective sometimes, you know, and like, that's like the mistake a lot of people are making is like, you know, like just not being willing to just look at it and say, okay, like clearly he spoke to a lot of people and created a massive scale of change that we've rarely seen. So why? How? What happened? And I think that that's a really interesting conversation to have. And I think that we should definitely do an episode about it because I think that there's just a lot to explore within that topic.
Yeah. Well, in the insights of history, let us know like what went well, what didn't go well, what worked, what didn't. And if we want to move forward, we have to look backwards and we have to stop looking to completely replicate things that we already did that failed, but we have to learn from why they failed and why they succeeded in the capacities that they did. So
absolutely. Well, we should wrap this up at that time. I wanted to talk a little bit about conservatives having Benghazi paranoia. But unfortunately, we kind of got on other topics. Brandon ended up coming through with the stream from the Wendy's, which we appreciate. But you know, maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. But we're going to be back tomorrow at the same time for EST. We're going to have a wonderful guest with us. Just a really fun guy. I'm not going to spoil it. But we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow on stream. And also tomorrow is what we're considering our 1-year anniversary. It's the anniversary of the first day that we recorded an episode of the podcast. And so that's going to be tomorrow. Episode 100 also might be coming out as soon as tomorrow to coincide with that. And we're going to just be celebrating a lot this week. This is our anniversary. We're very excited. We've made 100 episodes. We've been around for a year. We've accomplished a lot and we really hope to accomplish more. And we appreciate all y'all for watching, supporting us in various ways. Go to patreon.com/notsafe to support us further. And we'll see you next time.
I'm be Brandon. Bye-bye.